In November 2004, something appeared over the Pacific Ocean. It was not a known aircraft. It was not a common weather phenomenon. And it was not something the pilots of the United States Navy expected to encounter that day. The object had no wings, no propellers, no visible exhaust. And according to the military personnel involved, it performed maneuvers that seemed to defy the known limitations of modern aviation. For several minutes, highly trained pilots pursued what would later become known as the Nimitz incident. The encounter ended, but the story did not. More than 20 years later, that event is still being analyzed, debated, and investigated. But there is something even more intriguing. The Nimitz incident did not begin this story. It merely became one of its most famous chapters. Because long before digital cameras, modern satellites, and social media, people were already reporting similar phenomena. In 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing objects performing unusual movements near Mount Rainier. The story spread rapidly, and for the first time, a phenomenon that had seemed isolated began attracting international attention. Months later, another event would transform the subject into one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. Roswell, a small incident in the deserts of New Mexico. Decades passed. Investigations were conducted. Explanations were offered. Yet the name Roswell never disappeared. In fact, it became a permanent part of modern culture. And that happened because the phenomenon itself never went away. Reports continued to emerge. Documents continued to be archived. Military personnel continued to record unusual occurrences. Pilots continued to describe encounters. Meanwhile, governments around the world accumulated information. Most cases eventually received conventional explanations. Weather balloons, misidentifications, atmospheric phenomena, observation errors. But not all of them. And it was precisely that small group of unresolved cases that kept the debate alive for decades. Then something changed. Technology advanced. Radar systems became more precise. Cameras became more sophisticated. Monitoring systems became more effective. It seemed reasonable to assume that a phenomenon this old would finally disappear under the scrutiny of modern observation. But the opposite happened. New reports began to emerge, and some of them came from people professionally trained to observe the skies. Military pilots, air traffic controllers, radar operators, entire flight crews. Among the most famous cases are the videos known as FLIR, gimbal, and go fast. The recordings circulated for years. Later, they were officially recognized as authentic footage captured by military equipment. That did not mean the objects had been identified. It simply meant the recordings were genuine. And that distinction changed the conversation completely. For the first time, the debate was no longer centered solely on stories and eyewitness accounts. Now there was data, video footage, sensor readings, radar tracks, official reports. Then came an even more significant change. The term UFO gradually began disappearing from official documents. In its place came a new term, UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. At first glance, it may seem like a simple change in terminology, but it represents something much larger. The focus shifted away from speculation and toward investigation. In recent years, public hearings have been held in the United States. Military pilots have provided testimony. Former members of government programs have spoken publicly. Previously classified documents have been reviewed. New files have been released. And an increasing amount of information has become available to the public. Curiously, none of these revelations produced the definitive answer many people expected. In fact, they did the opposite. The more information emerged, the clearer one uncomfortable reality became. There are still incidents that remain without a conclusive explanation. That does not mean they are extraterrestrial visitors. It also does not mean they are ordinary phenomena that have already been fully understood. It simply means that some cases continue to resist traditional classification. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this story so fascinating. Because for decades, governments investigated, military organizations recorded incidents, pilots reported encounters, scientists analyzed data, technology evolved, files were opened, reports were published. And yet, the debate continues. Perhaps the answer is far simpler than it appears. Perhaps we still do not have enough information. Perhaps we are observing different phenomena and attempting to place them all under a single explanation. Or perhaps some stories endure because they have not yet reached their ending. The files continue to be analyzed. New reports continue to emerge. Investigations continue to take place. And while all of that continues, one thing remains exactly the same. The mystery continues.